Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rana Zayed, and I manage marketing for Federal and Partner here at Flexera. Thank you for joining our second of 6 Application Packaging Experts Roundtables. Before we start, I'd like to go over some housekeeping for the webinar. This session is being recorded, and again, this roundtable or webinar is meant to be interactive. So please type your questions into the Q&A chat window throughout the session. I would like to now introduce the panel who has nearly 75 years of combined experience in application packaging. We have Bob Kelly, who is the Director of Product Management. He's the author, founder of IT Ninja, and who has 20 plus years of experience in the application packaging industry. There's Kiran Montagi. He's the technical product manager. He has 8 plus years of experience in application packaging and Admin Studio. Mike O'Connor, who's the senior solution engineer who has 12 plus years of experience. James Baker, who's the director of sales who has 20 plus years of experience. And Spencer Anderson, who's the major account manager and has 4 years of application packaging experience. And with that, I will hand it over to Bob. Bob?
Hey. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming back or joining us for the first time, if that's the case. Last time we had a lot of great questions, very focused on MSIX, which were the kind of topics that we brought to the table. And just to avoid too much repetition in these, particularly for those who are coming to them all or watching them all back-to-back streaming, we'll start with a couple topics that we bring to the table just to get things going. And then, we're looking for questions, not just about what we're talking about, but, if you want to take it in an MSIX direction every week, we're happy to do it. So with that, I think we're going to start talking about Windows as a Service. And Karen's done some writing and research on this and is going to share with us some tips and insights around that.
Thanks, Bob. Hello, everyone. Before we get started into understanding what is Windows as a Service, I want to let you know about a really outdated information, just in case you don't know, that Windows 7 is end of life now. It was announced end of life on January 14, 2020. So just in case some of your machines are still stuck on Windows 7, this is the time. You're already late, but you have to consider moving to Windows 10. Let's try to understand what is Windows as a Service. From what I see, it mostly looks like a fancy word for how Microsoft has taken this new approach of deploying, updating, and servicing their operating system. Now, back in the days where there used to be one major version of operating system released every 3 or let's say 5 years, now things have changed with Windows 10. So now with the Windows 10, there is a new version coming out every 6 months.
Karen, your connection's not great. Can you hear me?
No,
you're frozen.
Going how they are. You guys frozen?
Yeah, you're frozen. We can hear you. Maybe turn your video. I know we'll lose you for a second when you make the switch, but turn your video off, and we'll pad until you come back.
And yeah, we've got a. By the way, Bob, just to let you know, we've got a couple of MSIX questions in following up from last week as well. So perhaps we can come back to them a little bit later today as well.
Yeah, definitely. I fully expect we'll talk about MSIX. I think that's clearly a topic a lot of people are interested in.
Sure.
Just setting stuff up so that we're not pigeonholed into a single topic, because we will definitely exhaust that topic by the end of 6 weeks.
Absolutely.
And Karen's coming to us from Bangalore, and they're like here these days. Everybody is online streaming from home, so I'm not surprised We finally run into some bandwidth issues. We were pretty lucky last week. But the idea is, now we're getting a new version of Windows 10 every 6 months. And if you're trying to keep up with that, there is application compatibility testing that you need to do, or at least be on top of, so that when you roll out that update, which doesn't seem like a major Windows update because you're not going from 10 to 11 to 12, but just a new version of 10. There are still application compatibility improvements being made and issues being identified. I think we got you back.
Can you hear me now? Oh,
yes.
I'm really sorry. It looks like I've got some problem with my internet, looks like. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so we're talking about Windows as a service and how things have changed over time from, from operating system getting released every 3 to 5 years to how it has changed to a 6 months release. So we can classify these releases into 2 big categories. You can call them updates and feature updates. So the one that goes out every once in a 6 month is a big release, which is generally referred as called a feature update, which has got new capabilities and all of that. And the quality updates are the ones which you would see every month, just like what used to happen in the past, like Windows updates. You get these monthly updates, which are primarily bug fixes, security fixes. This is the one that you'd care about for your patch Tuesdays. You look at your updates and all of that. Right now, the terminology that Microsoft uses for these major releases generally referred as semi-annual channels. Earlier, it was called as current branch, but now they have renamed it to semi-annual channel. And so when it gets released, it is generally referred as semi-annual channel targeted, which is meant generally for early adopters or for your piloting, which should be generally about 10% or 15% of your machines, just to make sure this new version is all good and doesn't break anything, right? And once there is enough confidence on this build, then the same semi-annual channel becomes a broader channel, and then this is the time where you would want to take this channel and deploy it on your machines across your enterprise. This broader channel was earlier referred as current branch for business. So with this, what happens is, at any given point of time, there will be 2 active semi-annual channels present. Now, let's say there is time for the third one to be released. Now, the first one, which was released earlier, would go end of support now, so which means you're left with 18 months. So you have 18 months now to look at upgrading to your new version of Windows, right? So it brings in a whole new problem. While back in the days where you do your desktop migrations, your application migrations once every 3 years or 6 years, now it becomes more like a continuous problem. You want to keep looking at this like every 6 months with a new version. You have to see, okay, you have to start piloting the one which is semi-annual channel. Once it's made broadly available, you should start moving to the new one. And along with that, you should start looking at your applications, your compatibility, and all of that. So that brings a whole new challenge to our IT professionals. Maybe I'll hand it over to Mike O'Connor to see how Admin Studio helps us with this continuous problem for updates of Windows 10 and migration of your applications to the new version 6 months. Hey, Mike?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Karen. Yeah, so as Karen said, right, it's a constant process. It's not the 2 or 3 year or more gap that you have between major Windows versions. So how do you stay up to date with it, right? And then it's not only the operating system, but it's the applications that are constantly coming through. Chrome every 6 weeks. So it's a constant refresh of the operating system, on a more regular basis than it used to be, as well as the application. So what we've helped customers with. And when we say migrations, right, it's not just a new operating system, but maybe it's a new place or a new method on which to make Windows available, right? So moving from desktop to work at home. A lot of organizations have had to roll out laptops for users, many for the first time. So that's migrating to a new device of some kind, and thus all the applications have to go with it. VDI is used selectively in certain places, and moving organizations and users to those types of environments, that can be considered a migration too. So there's lots of different reasons to look at a mass kind of packaging process and what needs to go through. And that's where Admin Studio has been often known, and that's where we've often seen a spike in usage of Admin Studio when big events like that come out. But really, because of the way Windows is coming out, because new versions come out more often than they used to be, we're seeing a little bit of the flattening the curve, as it were. Use some recent news type of thing where we're seeing less spikes like we did in the past, but the volume is increased quite a bit. So having something that can help you manage those applications and go through a continuous process and automate where we can, right? I wish we could automate 100% of the packaging process, although many of us would be in different careers then. But where we can automate, let's do that, right? And the applications that, for the most part, don't change too often in terms of the approach to preparing those applications, right? So the same application probably has the same switches if it supports it from the vendor from release to release. Sometimes that changes, maybe major versions, but that's usually for the most part. So if that stays the same, if the testing kind of regimen is the same, then let's automate it. So, with Admin Studio, we have first and foremost, we have a new module that came out 8 months or so ago called Package Feed Module that can help you stay up to date with the applications in your environment that are constantly changing. So especially the browsers, the PDF readers, middleware type applications that change. You in essence can subscribe to those, have Admin Studio on a regular basis, download the latest versions of them. Again, and we include the silent command line switches. So we've done a lot of that initial discovery and research for you. Pull those into Admin Studio, into its application catalog, its database. Then we can quickly, if we need to do some testing with Windows 10, we've broken out the different Windows 10 builds. So every currently supported version of Windows 10 or build of Windows 10 has its own testing suite or testing section in Admin Studio. So if you're on 1709 today or 1803 and you're looking at moving to 1809 or 1909 or the next version, you can test applications for both of those different builds, and see if there's any variation. There's probably very little, right, that changes from an application compatibility perspective. It's not like an XP to Skippy Vista to 7 migration, but there are some things every once in a while. Applications do have issues with a current version of Windows 10. We include the compatibility, the quote-unquote shim database that Windows includes, and checks for installers and different applications from running. We include that as well. So not only is there a broad rule set that we could test for anything, but we can also look at specific applications too. And then, preparing it in the right format. Back in the day, it was repackage everything that's not an MSI into one. And there's certainly advantages of getting everything into MSI, but more and more enterprises we talk to would rather, let's start with the vendor install. And if it's not an MSI, does it have command line switches, right? Is there a way that we can run it silently and have it configured correctly? And if we need to kind of augment that installer with a script that runs and does things before or after the installer, that kind of takes care of that, adds a licensing key, for that application, or adds configuration information, let's do that. So a lot of times they'll supplement the packaging work, and they'll include wrapping with scripts as part of it. And then it's the handoff to a distribution system like a config manager, like a VMware Workspace ONE or Altiris or something like that. Intune as well is coming up more and more. So all those different parts in the process that I spoke of downloading the application and getting the command line options and doing some kind of analysis and testing and doing some type of scripting or other customization or transforms for MSIs and hand it over to your distribution system. Admin Studio, our solution, can do that, and there's automation around that too. So our enterprise version includes PowerShell commandlets that you can do pretty much everything you can do in the UI. You can also do through PowerShell script, and we've seen a lot of organizations successful with taking the simple applications. It only takes me an hour or two to prepare, but it's still an hour or two that I have to engage and get that application out the door. Let's automate it, right? So then I'm spending the few more hours preparing the more difficult apps, the apps that don't have command line switches. So I have to look at repackaging, or the other ones that need a lot of custom work, or the vendors that change their application every release that requires me from a more research and more working. Let's spend the time with the humans doing the hard stuff, right? And let's automate the easy stuff. That way, we can stay up with the throughput. We can stay up with the higher volume of packages and new versions. And pushing out new releases isn't just nice to stay on the latest release and give your users the feature updates, but it's a security thing too, right? There's more and more vulnerabilities being discovered with software, and often case the way to fix it is push out a new release that the vendor has fixed it in. So again, staying up with all those different changes, automation is key. So if you have more than a few dozen applications and you need to stay up to date more often, that's something we can automate with Admin Studio.
Adding on to that, we're looking at in the next release to actually provide that automation, not just as a scripted capability that we have today. And you'll see Kieran and I have a pretty detailed article in the forum, along with a video explaining a script that we wrote to automate everything, just like Mike said. We're actually looking to take that functionality into Admin Studio directly. So the way it'll work is you can take a CSV file of applications from an inventory source like configman, and then give that to Admin Studio. We'll try to match that against your application catalog, so you can see which applications are managed that you have packaged for and which you don't. And then also try to match that up against that package feed module database. We have details on over 3,000 installers. If we can, and then you'll be able to choose what do you want to do with it when a new version becomes available. So there's a bunch of benefit, not only in automating the process, but just being aware of the fact that, hey, today there's a new version of 8 of the applications you care about. So that awareness is the first value. And then the more information we have, like if we have the file to download, if we have the detection criteria, and if we have the command line, which we do for over 1,000 of them, then we can completely automate those. And even if you are repackaging everything, you can repackage automatically using that silent command line data we have. So even if your goal is to get everything into MSI format, you can take advantage of these command line details to automate that repackaging process pretty successfully.
Bob, here's a question coming in. Do you find that the shorter the vendor release cycles, the more consistent the switches and options are?
Yeah, that's probably safe to say. They don't change frequently. We're obviously monitoring for changes, making changes as appropriate, and then testing those. So we can save you time when changes do happen. But yeah, it's true that, from minor release to minor release, we usually don't see changes unless maybe there's a customization option added as a result of some new functionality. But typically these smaller, minor repetitive releases are bug fixes and security enhancements, and those seldom result in change in command line support.
And here's another question that we get. This is just for a lot of other customers who might have YScript and are still using that. So it says, as a shop, we are still using YScript editor. What is recommended for script wrapping going forward?
We recommend PowerShell. I mean, we do. It's much more widely adopted. Obviously, there's the PowerShell app deploy toolkit, which is an open source wrapper that people are using that has some nice functionality to control the installation behavior and user experience. you can pop up a dialog and say, hey, you need to close this application. Do you want to delay it? It's going to require a reboot. You can change the colors and branding of that with your own logo. It's pretty cool. And so we had added support for that first. And then for YScript Editor, a lot of people were asking me, why the heck would you bring YScript Editor back? That's so old. Well, we had a customer advisory board, and half would be exaggerating, but close to half of the participants in that customer advisory board were leveraging YScript Editor to wrap their packages, just because they were a long time ago and they just kept doing it. And so now they have thousands of these things, and they've, crafted nice wrappers that they want to take advantage of. So what we did in Admin Studio is we added that same one-click wrap capability, where you can leverage a PowerShell template and create a PowerShell wrapper, or you can leverage a YScript Editor template and automate the creation of a YScript Editor executable script. Obviously, there's a lot more things you can do with YScript Editor, and a lot of people, I think, that are fans of YScript Editor were hoping that we'd pour a bunch of development cycles into enhancing it and making it better. That wasn't the intent, but we are definitely customer driven. So if we get a bunch of feedback that something specific is valuable, we will prioritize it like we would any other feature request in the Admin Studio suite and take care of it. But for purposes of wrapping your script and satisfying that use case, the version that we currently have does a very good job of that. So anybody starting out, I'd recommend PowerShell for sure. It's a very valuable skill to have. I think any good IT admin worth his salt has some PowerShell comfort, and the more you can do, the more valuable you are. So it's just a very valuable skill. And I know that the topic of skill sets came up in a lot of the questions we got last week when we were talking a lot about MSIX. And is MSIX going to be very easy? And I'm not going to need these skills anymore. Is MSI dead? Just the way we talk about there's going to be no desktop applications and they're all going to be in the cloud. That kind of doomsday mentality. It's the same, I think, applies here, because yes, things are headed in that direction, but it's very, very slow. Case in point today, just about nobody are packaging and deploying MSIX packages. That it's the goal that's the way things are headed for sure. Microsoft's been very clear with continued investment in use cases where MSIX adds value, that this is the future. And if you've seen any of their presentations, they hammer that point home that it is the future format. But I think competitively, it's more competitive to AppV for enterprises. And we'll have to see the ISVs take it on as something that they're willing to replace their MSI or legacy setups with. And there's a bunch of benefits to MSIX that should attract the ISVs to make the move. But I predict that it will take a couple of the big vendors to jump on board before others follow, and even before enterprises start seeing the value of MSIX and playing with it more. If your job is all about packaging and MSI understanding, I think there's a ton of overlap. You need to understand how applications work and how to troubleshoot them, what files belong in your package, which don't. It's a different format. The difference, I'd say the fundamental difference is you don't have to understand properties. You don't have to understand database tables. Those skills, like I said, there's a long tail on the value of those skills, because there's still going to be thousands of MSI setups around for years to come. But as things start to become more MSIX, you'll develop a new skill set to work with and handle those. And of course, our goal is to provide the tools to make your job easier in doing that. But it doesn't suddenly become a job that anybody can do because this magic new format is so simple. Every time packaging gets better, or the user experience improves, or the ISV's experience improves, it's almost always at the expense of administration of these technologies. And I don't think MSIX is going to be much different. It works in a virtual bubble, and that means you have to make sure the application can work properly. And if it doesn't, you have to find the right fixes to make it work. You can't just turn on verbose logging like we talked about last week. You have to inject a trace fix-up into the package and run it to get that kind of insight of what's going on and what might be failing. So there's different skills, but it's not anything that that's comfortable with MSI should worry about. You'll be able to pick it up pretty quick, I think.
Here's a good question for you, Bob, Mike. If we're not repackaging the legacy setup to MSI and using silent switches to install the application to keep up the security update for automation, aren't we losing out the advantage of MSI and might run into DLL hell or shared DLL issues, for example?
Yeah, that's a good segue into the last topic that I had, which was application compatibility, proactive versus reactive handling. And a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago now, at the App Manage event, Kieran and I did a session, actually Kieran didn't make it. I did a session on the rapid packaging, and the idea was we have this application readiness process that we talk about where it's very, very regimented, and you take it through the process and you do the same thing every time. And the output is a higher quality package that's less likely to cause you trouble. But when it comes to application compatibility, I think a lot of people skip that step and don't run into trouble. And I think because of that, because like DLL hell isn't a thing that one encounters very frequently anymore. Applications are better written, and we just don't see a lot of trouble. So what I recommended in that session, and the way to speed packaging was, one, leveraging something like the package feed module to get that command line very quickly, saves you all that research time. Either identifying new command lines or validating that the command lines that you used last time work in this new one. Of course, awareness that there is a new version. But then another big reduction in the time to creating, getting a package through the process was this notion of skipping the remediation of application compatibility problems. So if you have a conflict or you have an incompatibility with the operating system, you don't necessarily have to stop and fix them all in order to be successful. We still recommend getting it into the catalog and getting the report so that you can refer to it if you run into trouble. But taking it through that process and getting the report doesn't take very long. And then you move on and do your functional testing, see if it works the way you expect it to. If you do, great, you just saved yourself some time. If you don't, that's okay, because you've already got insights as to what's wrong with the package and a good tool to automatically fix some of those, or at least point you to the solution for addressing the problems that were identified. But a lot of things are warning or informational type errors that are largely noise. Some of us are very particular. We want all of our packages to be perfect. I remember, Windows installer days, we'd run those ICE validation reports and get just hundreds, like in Microsoft's own, packages that were examples of MSI were littered with warnings and even errors as reported by ICE. But those are just best practice recommendations. They're not necessarily going to ever cause a problem unless maybe some specific circumstance arises. So just the same way that it's good to see what the ICE errors are, and maybe a few that are going to cause you trouble and you jump on top of those, but most of them you dismiss and don't dig into until you run into a problem, until you get an error on installation and you need to investigate further. Now you have that as a resource to lean back on. I think conflict analysis and in many cases even application compatibility reporting is that same kind of benefit. So you have it. It's great to have to refer to if you encounter a problem, but maybe you won't encounter a problem. And if most of the time you don't, then you ultimately save yourself time by reactively addressing incompatibilities and conflicts versus doing it proactively.
To add to that, I don't think the biggest advantage of MSI is to avoid DLL hell. I think if the MSI is not written well, then you might still, there are good chances that you might still run into DLL hell. I think the biggest advantage of using MSI is the kind of customization it gives you with its standard properties, standard command lines. So you can install it silently. You can do a lot of customization. Let's say you want to turn off the auto updates. You want to get rid of some shortcuts or any of those, right? So it becomes a lot easier if you repackage something to MSI, but I don't think so. The biggest advantage of MSI is you can get away from DLL. I think there are good chances you might, and that is where I think, like Bob, you're mentioning, right, our set of tests that we have, I think are going to be really helpful and valuable to help you understand if there are any these kind of issues with MSI, and also help you with the solution.
Yeah, and of course, MSIX, that's one of the big things that it's going to address by running in a virtual bubble is there won't be the possibility of DLL, so you don't have to worry about application conflicts and resolving those at all, just by the nature of the format. So, but it's definitely a problem that anybody that's been packaging a long time has run into it. But I expect the experience of the majority is that it happens a lot less frequently now. But yeah, having an MSI doesn't prevent you from DLL hell, but it does give you a better opportunity to identify it, because you're basically comparing two databases for a duplicate file and path, which Admin Studio obviously can do very effectively. Whereas if you just have two setup files, you don't know about that conflict until you experience it or run into a problem. The good news is, even if you're not converting an executable to an MSI, Admin Studio can take that executable file into the Admin Studio database, and it extracts the files from that setup when possible, so that you can do this kind of analysis even without conversion. So at least for awareness, we're obviously not going to remediate an executable, but it would give you the heads up to know that you should be repackaging this or converting it to a virtual format. More questions?
Sure, there's plenty in the chat. So there's a couple more topics around WireScript editor, and just really where we are with that, and in terms of the latest version. And I appreciate your comments earlier, Bob. Right, the way forwards really, and our recommendation is PowerShell. But anything just to add around that subject at all?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we just wanted to not take that option away from people, because we had the ability. We were actually selling WisePackage, or not WisePackage Studio, but the WiseScript editor as a tool that you could purchase on its own. But we weren't updating it, and we weren't getting any feedback to support it or enhance it. So I was kind of the opinion that we should, as a product leader, I should either kill that application, end of life it, or find a good purpose for it, where we could, commit to its continued support. And I'm happy to say that, through that customer advisory board, it became very clear that a lot of people were leveraging it for wrapping. And so if you are using it for that use case, for wrapping your setup, and you run into a problem, Karen and I really want to hear about it, because that's the type of problem that we will make a priority, because the use case that we are committed to supporting for WiseScript Editor is that of wrapping. if you're using it to, do any of the million things that you could do with a script, and there's some function that doesn't exist or doesn't work right, we also want to know about it, but we'll prioritize it differently because our primary use case is wrapping. For those that don't know what Script Editor is, if you're newer to packaging and didn't get your hands on it, it is part of the professional and enterprise editions of Admin Studio now, and it's basically a point-and-click scripting interface. So you can choose update the registry, or copy a file, or delete a file, or an if-then, and then visually fill in the fields. So you do have to understand script logic to some degree, but you don't need to know how to code at all. You say, I want to update a registry entry, and then you click on it and you tell it what registry entry, what value, and that's now a capability. Our wrapper, of course, has some basic shell around it that you could use to inject customization or notifications to customers like you might in PowerShell wrapper. But in essence, the main benefit of that wrapper script, as with PowerShell, is the execution of that silent command line switch.
Sure, super. We have a number of questions from last week as well, and sort of following on the MSIX topic. Would you like to take some more of those on and perhaps to clarify some of those points as well?
I'll give them my best shot.
Yeah, no, good. So, there's a stack of questions coming in. Let me just get to the right ones.
Meanwhile, I got one, James.
Go ahead, Kieran. Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So there's this question: can we get solution of ICE errors? Earlier, it's found on Flexera, KB, but those are not present there. Well, that is one thing we, like Bob already discussed. We do have ICE set of rules in Studio already. So if you have any package that you want to check if it complies by all the ICE rules defined by Microsoft, you could always run the package against those ICE rules. But all of the ICE rules may not have a solution. So wherever it's possible and wherever it's possible for us to automatically fix, we would Admin Studio would go ahead and give a automatic fix to those errors in the form of a transform. So all you have to do is take your MSI, pass it along this with this transform, and your ICE rule should be taken care of.
Yeah,
ICE errors, your ICE errors should be taken care of.
One of the reports that we run is, how did it do against best practices? And when we talk about best practices, we are talking about those ICE rules for MSI. And like Kieran said, just like with application compatibility issues and DLL hell conflict type issues, we have in many cases automatic fix where you can just say, yeah, fix it, and we'll do what needs to be done. But if it's just there's an inherent problem that doesn't have a fix of make this change or make that change, then all we can really do is make you aware of it. But going back to the value of the ICE rules, I think is potentially questionable when you could have 50 applications that are in deployment working fine, and if you throw them all at the best practice test, you're going to see a bunch of red, and obviously it's still working. So it's one of those things that reactively, if you have a problem, there's definitely value, and this is how you can fix a bad package. But proactively to identify and try to correct all the problems that you get from that is probably of fairly limited value.
And we can help with the runtime testing too, right? So to Bob's point, we can spin up VMs. We have the ability to spin up virtual machines. It was originally for helping automate repackaging and creating virtual packages, but we can spin up a VM just for the purpose of spin up the VM and copy the package in question in there and then execute it with the command lines that you have. So MSI or EXE, I could just launch it on a test machine and then perform any, functional testing or hand the RDP connection info over to an app owner or somebody else to go through and do their functional testing, and it passes that, then I'm ready to publish into a distribution system. I also know some orgs that have a test, let's say config manager, right? They have a production and a test environment because they like to test everything. So they'll load it into, they'll have Admin Studio publish it into the test system at first, test deploy it, test run it on test machines, everything test, and then once it all passes, then it's an easy matter of just publishing it again, except this time to the production instance. And Admin Studio can remember multiple connection, so you can have multiple config managers, multiple other distribution systems all remembered and saved, and then it's just a couple clicks to get it published.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we've got that ability to publish to different endpoint management systems, but we're not recommending that you publish and automatically deploy to production. I think pretty much everybody has systems set aside for pilot testing that are representative of the different hardware and gold image configurations around the company, so that you can identify if it had an effect on an application that you're not even testing. So that need to pilot test and do functional testing, can't be understated. Anybody that's been burned knows that that time is worth the effort. One of the tips I'd give that maybe not everybody's run into, but I'd go to consult on a lot of projects where all the pilot testers were admins. So they were all like running as administrator all the time, and everything always worked fine. And then they, half the time a deployment would actually go to a regular end user. It wouldn't work as expected, and scratching their heads, why didn't we catch this? Like, it seems obvious the way I framed it, but it can be hard to see sometimes until you really get burned.
Here's a question actually about, I think we have about 15 minutes left, and probably going to talk a little more about MSIX with regards to the questions that are coming in right now. Yeah, but this is a good one here. Can you take in an executable into the database, expand the files, and then use the PowerShell commands in package feed module to put out an MSIX?
Yes. Yes.
And it would be pretty straightforward.
Right, Karen?
Yes, that's correct. You could. Well, there are multiple ways in Admin Studio how you could take that exe and then move that to MSIX. You could either use our conversion wizard, or you could use the automatic conversion tool. If you have a bunch of such exes, you can put all of those exes in one single tool and click one single button, and the conversion would happen in a batch, and you don't have to worry about it. Once you come back after, let's say, over a weekend or something, the entire batch of those exes should be converted to MSIX. Or we have our famous repackage tool anytime. So yes, yeah. So there are multiple ways of taking exes and the advantage of package feed command line and then smoothly converting that to MSIX.
Yeah, that automated application repackager is a cool one, but it almost promises too much, right? So I try to frame it more realistically and say, if you have 100 applications you need to package, and maybe the package feed module has all the command lines, and you say, okay, automated application conversion tool, go ahead and package them all over the weekend while I'm gone. When you come back Monday, you're not going to have 100 perfect packages, right? You saved yourself a lot of time for sure, but you still have to test, and things never work 100% of the time. So yeah. Even with the automation capabilities we're talking about, it all is very focused on the ideal, right? We don't have a goal or intention or even an aspiration to be able to repackage everything automatically. Our goal is to help you avoid wasting time doing repetitive things on boring applications. That alone can save you considerable time when you add it all up and really add a lot of value. But there are, customizations required. There's analysis required, testing required. Some applications don't have silent command line capabilities or aren't available in the format that you want them. And there's still plenty of work to be done. Our goal is to help make your job easier, not to stop you from having to do it. And, that could seem good or bad depending on how you look at it. But there's no magic bullet you don't have to package anymore. But we can try to make it faster and try to make it easier so that you can essentially focus on the tough stuff and leave the easier stuff to automation.
I think this is going to be an interesting question. is Admin Studio incorporating any of the package support framework into its MSIX tool?
Yes, it is. Question. How would you respond to that, Karen?
Well, yes, it is. We definitely understand how important. Yeah, so we definitely understand how important package support framework is. That is one way you can look at or assess the runtime issues of MSIX package, and we totally understand it. And it not only helps you assess the issue, but it also helps you fix those issues. So it becomes important for us to have that support in the tool. So the tool that we are coming up, the one we talked about in our last session as well, the new MSIX editor from Admin Studio, that will have support for package support framework. Like we said, it's going to be a beta, so we may not have the complete or the full complete support for package support framework, but you'll definitely able to see, how do we get into MSIX package, how do we test its runtime behavior and then report the errors. Well, we definitely plan to make some automatic recommendations in the future as to, hey, for this MSIX package, based on the tracing and based on the test you performed on the package, these are the errors and these are the automatic fixes we offer. So that is going to be the future, but for the beta, we might not be there yet.
Yeah, we're getting there. We mentioned the MSIX editor beta last time, and we did get a good response of additional people requesting participation. Watch for a response over the next couple of weeks. Appreciate that. But that editor, the main fix-up that most people are going to want to deal with is the file redirection fix-up, where the application is referring to a relative path that is invalid because of virtualization. So that is one in particular where we're looking to be able to help you just push a button that says trace this application, and we'll package it and launch it with that trace fix-up installed and monitor your use of the application. So you use it a little bit, and then we'll watch for errors where the application's trying to find a file that doesn't exist that we know is in the package. And with that information, we can recommend or automatically apply that file redirection fix-up with the proper parameters to address the problem. So that's kind of the big one. There are other fix-ups out there. There's one for running pre and post scripts, PowerShell scripts. I'm sure we'll get to supporting that as well. But like Kieran said, it is a beta. It is something we are going to be iterating upon. So we're deciding, what things have to be done and are most important, but also differentiate us early, and then we'll be continually adding to that story and making it better and better. But really appreciate the interest in the beta, and anybody else who wants to jump on board, please do. We sent the link, I think, with the recording on the last one, and then you can find the article about the beta and the sign-up sheet in the Flexera community.
Good. Okay. So just in terms of some other MSIX related topics, and a follow-on question from last week, we were talking about the MSIX certificates and how Admin Studio helps with this process. And there's a question around, does the app still install and does it still run if the certificate expires?
I've heard there's a workaround that we are going to investigate, but the application will still run, but I don't believe you're going to, unless you do something special, which we'll be looking into. So an expired certificate would mean don't install, right? You wouldn't want it to. So expired certificate is a bad certificate, but I believe there are policies to control the behavior, per environment. You had more to add, Karen?
Yeah, so they have this thing called time server URL, where you could specify your URL, and that would make the applications work, even if the certificate is expired. So I also read one of the questions, do we have this in Admin Studio? We don't have it in Admin Studio today, but yes, it is. When I say today, I mean the beta of MSIX, but this will be coming pretty soon once we keep iterating on the MSIX editor. But yes, the question, to answer it, yes, there is a possibility. It depends on how you have signed. If you have provided the time-server URL during your signing, the application the MSIX would still install and still work, even if the actual expiration date on the certificate is gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we keep talking about the MSIX editor beta as our ideal MSIX support in Admin Studio, but I'll point out that we have lots of support for MSIX right now. You can use the install shield editor, and it's Windows installer looking interface to generate MSIX packages. You can use the Repackager to generate MSIX packages. You can use the automated application converter to generate MSIX packages. We've got reports that help you look at the suitability of conversion to MSIX. So there's lots of support today. What you don't have right now, and it's not that big a deal because you don't have any MSIX packages, you can't open an MSIX in the install shield editor and edit it directly. You need the project file, which is really more of a thing a developer would have and not a repackager. So we have lots of ways to help you generate MSIX packages, but not really edit them and create a good modification package. And that's the use case that has driven us to create this new tool that, as we've been saying, is currently in early beta phase.
And it's a similar approach, right, that we took with AppV. Right? AppV is you can get into that format, but you don't open it directly or really go out of it. So we had a lot of use cases, a lot of customers using AppV, and they wanted something to, instead of making changes and then reconverting it again or sequencing it again into that format, could we edit them directly? So we do have a virtual package editor that does that for AppV packages. So this MSIX editor will be similar, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's following the same suit. And if 5 years from now, MSI isn't used as much and MSIX is, the tools are still both going to be there and be options for you. You just might, depending on your adoption and what you care about, you'll use, one editor over another. But we've actually got a couple already, and this will be another to provide the best experience for the format, not try to distill it down to its lowest common denominator and lose the value.
Here's a good follow-on question just regarding MSIX and AppV, right? You said the applications run into a virtual bubble. It sounds similar to AppV. Will we have the same restrictions as with AppV, where multiple MSIX packages might need a connection group to fully interact with each other?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, exactly how that's going to work is one of the things that isn't completely spelled out to us by Microsoft at this stage. It will be like a manifest reference. So in the manifest, you'll say, this application can work with this application, kind of like a modification package relationship. There won't be the concept of virtual application groups like there is in AppV. I know the team felt that that process of AppV groups didn't always work that great and was kind of temperamental. And so they're not looking to follow that same approach, but obviously need to provide a similar capability in the end. I keep seeing you smile, Spencer. Are you reading funny questions? Or are you doing something completely unrelated?
No. I was just thinking ironically that I'm looking over my shoulder. I've got my dog just laying on my couch. So I just.
There's been all kinds of great background activity in video chats these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, good stuff. So there's still plenty of plenty of questions coming in. So I think you covered this, but we can go through it again, Bob. It's really around if an executable is coming through, are we using the process of converting it to an ISM first or a project file before converting it into an MSIX? And anything more we can talk about of the process of getting from executable to MSIX with App Studio.
I'll let you take that, Kieran.
Yes, that would still happen behind the scene, but I think you shouldn't worry about it because all of that is 100% automated. We are not putting you into a complication of, hey, you know what, we convert this exe to ISM and then you have to open this ISM and make these many changes and then we'll be able to convert it to MSIX. No, we don't do that. All of that happens behind the scenes, so you don't really have to worry about it. All you have to do is supply exe and what you get out is MSIX. That's it. There are a few reasons why we do that. Maybe we don't want to get into details, but yes, we still do that ISM project file for exes to MSIX.
Yeah, it helps us leverage the investment we've already made, and then the MSIX editor obviously won't have any project files, so we'll be taking a different approach.
Sure. Just a general question around MSIX as well. Just in terms of dependency management, how does that work for the IT pro moving forwards?
It depends on what kind of dependency you're talking about. If you look at the MSI package itself, right, the format itself, it supports about 5 types of dependencies inside. There is OS package dependency, and if you have got some framework dependencies like .NET, and let's say if you're talking about a modification package, then the main package on which you're building the modification package becomes the dependency for the modification package. So there are altogether about 5 types of dependencies. So depending on the kind of dependency you want to add, you'll have to make such an entry in the manifest file and let know your MSIX that, hey, you know what, .NET 4.5 or VC++ 2012 or 14, this is the package my MSIX is dependent on, and you make those entries in the manifest and you should be all set. Now, this is where our MSIX editor is really going to help you in the future, that we open up that list of dependencies that are already added in your package, and we also allow you to add any dependencies that you would want to add. So now you don't really have to worry about understanding the manifest file and trying to figure out, hey, where should I add the dependency? What should be the syntax? What should be the format? How should the tag look like in the MSI in the manifest file? It's an XML file essentially. So you don't have to worry about all of that. Admin Studio just open up the entire dependency view, and you can just go ahead and add your dependencies. So that will make it a lot easier.
Brilliant, super.
Very good. I think our hour is up, but again, we'll be back. Yeah, time flies when you're having fun.
Just like that.
But we will be back next week, and we'll do this again. And we've got a recording going out. Again, if we didn't get to your questions, we'll try to hit them next week, or we're keeping hold of all these questions. And at the end of this series, we will be posting to the community a long blog post where. Maybe we'll group them up by topic, so it's not one giant blog post. But we'll rehash some of the questions we answered and address those that we couldn't, either due to time or complexity or being too niche of a specific case to discuss in a large group. But we do want to answer them all, so don't think we're abandoning your questions. We'll be getting to them one way or the other. And thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Thank you all.